It goes out on the Saturday, and on the Wednesday of the week after, effectively his royal career, whatever you want to call it, is over. We're basically putting it all on the table. We're saying to them, this is obviously going to be 100% an interview about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. I was still in touch with the palace saying, we still have not heard from him. There's reams of coverage about this case. He has to speak. And of course, there's a point at which you just don't think that's ever going to happen.
What was the point where you realised where this interview was going?
Answer 2, I thought, this is going to go big. How is this going to be on air? You can't really believe it. So I said to her, very carefully, the following sentence. So, how do you think it went? And she says...
Hi, you are watching Things People Do with me, Joe Marler, on YouTube. Click like or subscribe. Only click like if you like it. In fact, no, click like if you don't like it. Because we all lie sometimes. Click subscribe if you want to be subscribed. Fuck, I'm out of breath. Enjoy. I think it says I should start.
Yes, it does.
But would you like to?
Are you a bit nervous before
I am
today's?
very nervous.
You're nervous because of a topic we're going to talk about, which you've often talked about in the past, and we've had to take it out of the podcast because you've referred to it in certain terms.
I would say I'm more nervous about Sam and her profession rather than the subject.
Tell me
I think
more.
the subject we can, deal with a little bit, but it's more like how experienced and professional Sam is.
Ooh.
And then I just worry that every 5 minutes she's judging this shower shit. and then somehow halfway, I just picture her halfway going, fuck this, I'm off. And just getting up and walking out. So that's what I'm nervous about. And that's what I'm really looking to you today, Tom, to help guide me with, as we've already had the pre-show chat about you two being TV exec. What was it? What do you call it? Veterans?
We just said we worked in TV Centre, BBC TV Centre.
Yeah, you were like, we're TV Centre veterans.
It wasn't done like that.
It was definitely done like that. But anyway, hello, Sam.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm really good. So basically, are you saying that you're a bit intimidated? Is that what you're saying?
I'm somewhat intimidated, yes.
Somewhat. We'll go with somewhat.
I'm
by
somewhat
the theme or by
intimidated.
me personally, which I'm really thrilled by.
Yes.
The latter.
But
Thank you.
It's a very strong energy coming off of you.
Thank you very much.
From the
I'll
off.
take that.
And I'm like, I'm into this, but I'm not sure how to control it and not even try and control it. How do I guide it? Or where the fuck is this episode going to go? Because then we get onto the subject matter and you're like, how do we dance around that? How do we, samba?
Oh, I like what you did there. Samba. That was very good. Was that deliberate or accidental?
Oh, he's pleased with himself.
It was accidental, wasn't it? Let's be honest.
Was it?
Yeah, maybe it was.
Don't know, but I'll use it again next time we have someone called Sam in the show. Right, let's get to it. You were a producer on Newsnight.
That's right.
And that's on BBC. Am I right?
Well done. Yeah.
Is that
full
still
points.
going? Why do I
Yes.
know Newsnight?
Because it's always on. It was always on until budget cuts, etc., etc.
No, but it's still on.
It's still on. They've truncated it. So instead of being 46 minutes of geopolitical and political insight, it's now 30 minutes of the same. But it's on BBC Two. You can watch this evening if you want to. 10:30 at night.
Geopolitical and political insight.
Absolutely. I was
So
trying
it
to
don't-
impress you.
It would only be 42 minutes of political issues.
Basically, politics, domestic politics, economics, all the really heavy stuff that you really want to watch just before you go to bed because you're stimulated by such subjects or, you want to kind of make your brain run down a bit and go to sleep.
Sam, help Joe out further here by listing famous Newsnight presenters that Joe would be familiar with.
Okay, Joe, go for it. If you starter for 10, the one, the only, Jeremy Paxman. Any recognition?
The one who was on University Challenge.
Correct. Starter for 10. Well done.
He
Congratulations.
used to do it.
He did it for like 25 years.
Okay, was he any good?
He was sensationally good. I'm not going to lie.
Is he still good?
He doesn't do it anymore.
Oh.
He left, and then basically in the interim there was Emily Maitlis, who did the Prince Andrew interview, who I work with a lot.
She's fantastic. Dude.
She is fantastic. And now Victoria Derbyshire. Also fantastic.
I don't think I've ever watched it.
No. No, that's fine. There's still time. It hasn't been axed yet. So you can make a pledge right now, an oral contract, as we would say in the law. Careful, eyes again, watching. You can make a promise right now that you'll watch it. See if you like it.
You
Victoria,
want me to make
Derbyshire.
an oral contract? Right. What does your job actually entail?
Which one? The old one?
The Newsnight producer job. Like,
Okay.
Obviously, we've got Ryan's not here today, but we've got an able replacement in George, who you know well. They basically do the graft behind the
Yes.
show. Believe it or not, there is production that's put into the show, and we sort of either dress it up or fuck it up.
Correct.
Is that what we do?
I think so.
But Ryan and today George put in a lot of the graft, and it's mainly their baby, which I use as an excuse for when it does fuck up to blame.
Yes.
Is that sort of your role?
I think you
on
have just
Newsnight?
summed up being a producer brilliantly in about 2 sentences. So basically, the role of production is do virtually everything, which is often quite thankless for people sometimes with, forgive me, quite big egos. I'm not judging either of you. I'm just saying. And then if it goes right, the people at the top tend to get the credit. And if it goes wrong, it tends to be your neck on the line. But the great thing about being a producer is that effectively you're doing so many possibly interesting, fascinating things along the way, from making tea, photocopying, or somebody might get sick, you might end up on air, or you're going around the country trying to get content with interesting people, or you're basically putting together television or radio for consumption by the general public and kind of like putting it all together like a wizard.
Oh,
Let's go for wizard.
you're a wizard, Harry.
I'm a wizard.
You're a wizard, Sam. So what made you want to do behind the scenes role as opposed to front of house role?
Yeah, I've never really been interested in the front of house, which is ironic given obviously things have taken a bit of a turn for me since I left the BBC. But I just loved putting it all together, right? You get all the teamwork, the camaraderie, it's frightening, it's thrilling. You do everything from scratch every day. So at the start of the day, there is nothing in that programme. And by the end of the day, there's 45 minutes of television of variable quality if it was me in charge of it, or excellent quality if it was some of the other people. And effectively, from scratch, you're creating tiny pieces of television, in a day. So it's exciting, it's worrying, it's concerning. And the thing I liked about it is that you are quite static. So I was based in London. I was bringing up a kid on my own. I worked part-time. So what job in the world can you work part-time, bringing up a kid in an exciting environment? One day you're with the Chancellor of the Exchequer, next day you're in the sandpit. So I really liked the contrast between doing kind of crazy, interesting interviews with fascinating people one day and then the next day cleaning out the bins, It was kind of like that contrast that really made it exciting to me.
I think, Joe, so I've done jobs tangential to this and obviously worked with producers on Five Live,
Really?
things like that.
Hang on.
Nothing. What?
No.
What?
Tangential.
One step removed. Is that better? Basically, I've worked with people like Sam, who's A, save your bacon, but also B, give you bacon that can be saved in the first place. Because if you are a presenter, then you can know absolutely nothing about a subject. And someone like Sam not only ensures you know everything about a subject, but it makes it sound like you're an expert on it and does all the stuff which is the hardest. They line up the guests, they decide the running order, they get the guest, they get another guest when that guest falls away. And they do it, Sam, with a clock always ticking because Newsnight always has to go out and you can't suddenly say there is no Newsnight or that tonight Newsnight is 15 minutes long.
Yeah, you can't say that without getting sacked. But I think you put it together brilliantly there. The interesting thing about it is before I worked in TV, in my head, because I used to be a criminal defence barrister, right, where you're an encyclopedia. You carry all the law in your head. That's kind of the job. And in my head, a TV presenter was like that. He or she was an encyclopedia. It never occurred to me that there was someone who kind of put together the questions, the brief, the information, the knowledge, all of that. I hadn't got a clue when I used to watch telly myself. And I sometimes watch up to 8 hours a day. I'm really into television. I had no idea that there was someone behind that. And so when I first started doing the work, and I was working with Jeremy Paxman, who at that stage was basically the foremost man in the country when it came to presentation, and my words were coming out of his mouth on the telly on Newsnight, I was like, okay, this is sensational. But I didn't really realise how much the producer does before I did the job. And Jeremy needed 5% of us, and some need 95%. It depends on the individual. Where would you say you guys are, just out of interest?
I would say we sit at the 70% needing. Oh, you think it's high? It is higher,
What's
isn't
it? Show me you're working out.
Well, Ryan does everything.
Yeah.
So Bobby gets the guests.
Bobby
mainly.
gets the guests. Ryan
Bobby.
does all the research in terms of how we're going to question what he finds the destination, and also works back from there using where the episode wants to go, and then he texts us saying, if you've got any questions to add, let me know.
And how often do you add a question, just out of interest?
I don't think I've replied once to that, but I then do my own questions in the book on the train up.
And how long is the train trip, just out of interest?
55 to an hour.
Okay.
So
Well, thank you for your contribution.
thank you. There are some stuff here. So actually, maybe I sit at the 95% mark.
I think the 70 was a bit unfair, really. I'm hearing, I don't know whether you're hearing, around 95, I think is probably fair.
Have you come across a presenter where they've needed you more, like myself, more than Paxman, for example?
Yes, I would say Paxman really didn't need me, but he would endure me. And
So the fact that Joe and Paxman have been talked about in the same answers is astonishing. And
Yeah,
Jeremy,
yeah.
if you're listening, Jeremy, I apologise.
We're in his top 5 podcasts to listen to. Hello, Jezza. How you doing, mate?
Jezza all the way.
Jezza.
So I would say he literally did not need me, but he would endure me and tolerate me and be congenial towards my existence. And then there would be others whose names I cannot, of course, say, where, boy, did they need you. And the worst ones are the ones who don't realise that they need you, but really, really need you. They're the really frightening ones. Just saying.
when did it go? We're about to talk about an example when it went very right, Sam, in many ways. Give us an example of an interview that maybe you'd set up as a producer and you primed the presenter to conduct and it's gone massively tits up.
Yeah, tits up is quite common, but tits up is usually just boring, or, you know, you've put loads of effort into it and it just doesn't work out. I would say probably the one that I mentioned in my book, which really went tits up, was with the very celebrated comedian Amy Schumer. Really funny woman.
In films.
In films.
Yep.
Yeah. And really good at what she does in films. But not a natural bedfellow, really, with Newsnight. Now, it was during this period where basically every news editor in the world, you may or may not remember this time, they wanted to basically get Kim Kardashian on Syria, right? They want Beyonce on the future of the economy.
Who's come up with that idea?
I do not know, but it used to get clicks, right? It's clickbait, right? Every news editor is like, what can we get, you know, kind of like Justin Timberlake to speak about? I know, double dip recession. So you had this really, really awful period where poor celebrities were dragged onto news programmes, probably against their will, to talk about things like the future of the world and the American election, which is what we asked Amy Schumer about.
Right.
And then meanwhile, what she wants to talk about, which created a rather awkward interview, is, of course, her new movie, and in this particular case, masturbation. So we had a situation where poor Emily Maitlis...
Hang on.
Yeah.
She did a movie on masturbation.
One of her topics is body pride kind of stuff and, you know, sexual pride and all this kind of stuff.
So you've asked her for the election and she's there talking about flicking a bean.
She went from election to erection. That was the problem.
Nice.
Thank you. That was off the top of my head, by the way.
That's very good.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm available. Weddings, bar mitzvahs. And basically, it was a clash of those two worlds because for poor Emily, she's like, but what do you think about Hillary Clinton? And then obviously Amy is like, I don't really want to talk about Hillary Clinton, but let me tell you about my views on sex. And that clash, I think, of those two worlds at that particular period was excruciating. And you sit as a producer with a notebook, a bit like this one, right? And you write down what they say that you think you're actually going to put to air. And my pen was like this. And my tension levels were higher and higher and higher. And it was, you know, it was bad for her, poor Amy. Not much fun talking about geopolitics. And probably not much fun for Emily talking about all the other issues that Amy wanted to talk about. But, you know, we ran 7 minutes, no babies were dead.
Weirdly, one of the moments on Newsnight that everyone remembers, Sam, is the occasion where Jeremy Paxman asks the same question 12 times. One of those things, Joe, which you would never have planned, I'm guessing, Sam, as producer. I tell you what, Jeremy, just asked Michael Howard the same question 12 times, but it turns out to be unbelievably dramatic.
What happened here?
So basically, Michael Howard, he was a politician.
Yep.
And he was on
Who for?
the Conservatives.
Oh.
Right. Oh, no. Political bias already. I'm impartial on that. I didn't show any facial expressions when talking about Michael Howard.
I only went, because I know that Tom supports the Green Party. Do you?
It's true, actually. Yeah.
Do you actually?
And now I've left the BBC, I'm able to say that's true.
Do you support the Green Party?
What?
Do they have a party?
Hey? Sorry, I had too many questions. Paxman Howard, shoot.
So he's a Conservative minister.
Yeah.
He comes on the programme. The curve of the programme just...
Oh,
is
I know the
basically
one.
Like
He's got very strong hair round the edges and glasses.
very strong hair,
Yes.
very strong look.
Olive-skinned, like slightly
A
tanned.
little bit.
I think he'd been on
Yeah,
holiday.
I know
Maybe
him.
Yeah,
Yes,
exactly
yep,
that.
I do know the one.
And the idea of the programme is basically to hold people to account, make them squirm. And on this particular occasion, it became very famous because he asked him the same question. Please don't ask me what the question was.
Did you threaten to overrule him?
Thank you very much. He asked the question, did you threaten to overrule him 12 or 13 times? I can't remember which.
About the 8th time, he's so bored, isn't it?
He asked exactly the same question.
Because he's not getting the answer, Sam, is he?
He's not getting the answer, and I'm so sorry. Production moment here. Sorry to ruin it. Everyone just take a moment. Sorry if this is going to devastate your day. Not all of them were because he was asking the question again. From what I understand, some of them were because there was a technical difficulty. The other guest hadn't arrived, and so the producer was going, just ask him again. Just ask him again, for God's sake.
So just fill time.
Time filling.
Oh.
I can't be sure what percentage, going back to your 70-30, what it was in terms of the number that were genuine and the number that were time-filling, but I'm afraid some of them were time-filling, I understand. Sorry.
Did he get the answer?
Don't think he does he?
No.
He gets to about 7 or 8 and he's so bored by this point, isn't he? And Howard has decided just to double down on, I'm not going to answer this question. So Paxman's just, did you threaten to overrule him? Did you threaten to overrule him? Did you threaten to overrule him? He's just ludicrous.
I love this guy.
Paxman's amazing. He never gives up. One of my first gigs at Newsnight, I was booking bums on seats, basically, because you won't be shocked to hear that not many people want to come on a programme which is live television late at night where they get mauled in front of the nation. Shocking but true. And so it was quite hard to get people on. And I got on. Do you remember this guy, Conrad Black? He was like a media mogul.
Owned the Telegraph.
The Telegraph.
Dressed
He ended
up
up
as
in
the
prison.
what did he dress up as? Wasn't the Pope, but he had a famously lavish birthday party where he dressed up as Cardinal Richelieu.
Yes, very good. God, look at all of this. Bloody hell.
Who the fuck's Cardinal Richelieu?
Quite impressed. I'm a bit intimidated now, mate.
What is Cardinal Richelieu?
Doesn't matter for now.
Don't worry
All
about
right,
it, mate.
cool.
Google
Conrad
it
Black.
later.
Yep.
Conrad Black, he'd come out of prison. He'd written a book, Wise. I sent him to be interviewed by Jeremy. They did not get on, understatement, and I think Conrad threatened to punch him in the mouth. So I get a message from the producer, and I've set it all up saying, it's gone a bit wrong. Conrad's threatened to punch Jeremy in the mouth. I'm like, oh, God, I'm going to be sacked. What's happened? Paxman comes back. He loved it.
Oh.
He loved it. So, the 20 minutes I spent thinking my career was over. But that was one of my first interviews, I think. Conrad Black threatening to punch Jeremy in the mouth. Great piece of television.
How do we do this?
We dive straight in, Joe. It's exactly what we do. I'm going to start it off with two
Hang on.
words, Sam.
Sam, were you reaching for some water?
I was reaching for some water.
It's
I got
just
distracted
there,
by
there
the
you
two of you. Sorry.
Sam, you take your water as I say 2 words to start this section. And the
Hang on.
words,
What section are you starting?
Prince Andrew.
Oh, no, you're not doing it.
Do you want some context here, Joe, to your feelings about this man or this interview?
Give me as much context as if I don't know.
I'm
Anything.
gonna let Sam tell the story.
Okay.
Because, Sam, this was an extraordinary interview done by Emily Maitlis on Newsnight. It is now the subject of a film in which you are played by...
Billie Piper.
Billie Piper.
I'm not even on drugs, mate. This is actually true.
Billie Piper plays you.
Billie Piper.
Billie fucking Piper's playing you.
Yes, can you believe it?
And who's playing Emily Maitlis?
Gillian Anderson, Joe.
Gillian or Gillian?
Doesn't matter at this point.
Gillian Tooting Anderson.
From X fucking Files
Correct.
and Sex,
Sex
Education.
Look,
She's fantastic in that.
She's
She's
incredible.
brilliant. Oh my God. When's this out?
you should watch it. It's going to be out on April the 5th on Netflix. And you can see Billie Piper and Gillian Anderson.
Do you get to make any sort of cameo?
I do not. I know it's tragic.
Should have
It's
got
very
some-
producer, that, isn't it? Even in a film about you, you don't get to appear on screen.
Well, I think what I should have done if I'd thought about it, if I wasn't trying to keep it classy, because Netflix people are super classy and amazing, and they've been so good to me.
Hang on, are you
I should just
saying that
run
even
across
if they're
set.
not sat in the gallery out there?
I would say it, but probably not quite as effusively. Just to be clear, Katie, I love you. I think if I was being my true self, you are correct. My true self would have maybe just tried to get an arm in or something. You know, like we're on set, Gillian's doing the big moment between Prince Andrew, who's
Good.
played by Rufus Sewell.
Yeah.
It's the moment, and I might just get a cheeky kind of like, "Hi, Mum," you know, in the back. I mean, that's my instinct, but I fought my instinct, thank God, because I think I would have been removed by security.
How did the idea to make this interview come about into a film? How did that happen?
So basically, I wrote a book.
Yeah.
Which I thought my mum would read, which she did. Thanks, Mum.
Good.
And maybe 3 or 4 other people. But very luckily for me, there was quite some interest in the story of how the interview came about and what happened on that day, because I was in the room 15 feet behind him. So in effect, you are kind of the Prince Andrew of this, because the distance between us is there. I'm going to leave that there. And so the book...
Sam. Let the record state
Yes, sir.
there is no similarities between me and that person that you shall named.
It's not Voldemort. You just say his name.
And I would ask you to strike that from the record
Yes,
with
sir.
immediate effect.
Immediate effect, done.
Thank you. Sam, please continue.
But in answer to your question, I was in the room, you know, watching Emily. You can be Emily Maitlis in that case. This is going to be easier for you. Yes, beautiful, beautiful.
Thank you.
So you're Emily Maitlis. You know, I'm in the room with Emily. I was in the entire process of negotiating the interview. And I wrote a book about it. It's the last 3 chapters. You don't have to read the rest if you don't want to. But you can read the Amy Schumer chapter, which you might
Which is
enjoy.
nice.
Yeah, you don't have to worry. But I'm really lucky that, you know, I was working with a production company and Netflix were interested in my tale. And so here we are, a few years later, with Billie Piper playing me in a
Billy
movie.
Tooting Piper.
Billie Tooting
Gilly
Piper.
Tooting Anderson.
Gillian Tooting Anderson, Rufus Tooting Stewart, and Keely Tooting Hawes.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Mega cast.
Joe.
Mega Tooting cast.
So let's get into this interview then, because you've watched it a number of times. We've talked about it a lot.
How many times have you watched it?
It's got to be at least 10.
Wow.
And every time I've watched it, it gets worse.
It does.
It's bonkers. Right, let's get. How did that interview come about? Like, was that you and your team that went and looking for it, or did his team come to you? Like, what happened?
So it's a combination of the two. So the job is basically to get bums on seats, right? And it's a hard job because we were completely the underdog at the back of the queue for the places that people want to do interviews because they're hard work on Newsnight. And this particular one, the poor screenwriter said to me, "So tell me how it all began." Peter Muffet, brilliant guy, did Silks and Your Honour with Bryan Cranston, and now he's stuck with Sam McAlister, poor man. Sorry about that, Peter. He goes, "How did it all begin?" And it began 13 months before that interview happened, but it began with an email. I mean, you know, sorry about that. It's not very dramatic. But I'd worked with a PR company. They got in touch and they offered what we call a puff piece in the trade, which basically means come and film Prince Andrew. He can talk about how amazing he is. He was
charity
working, the charity work pitch at the Palace. And so back in October 2018, I declined that opportunity because we don't do puff pieces. We do proper hard
That's the thing.
interviews.
It's called a puff.
It's called
piece.
a puff piece.
That's like a proper
It's an industry term.
industry term.
Yes,
puff
thank you
piece.
very much.
So you said no to the puff piece then?
Said no to the puff piece. And
Yep.
then I sent back, you know, basically saying, you know, if in the future Prince Andrew would like to do an interview that's more wide-ranging, i.e. freedom
Yeah.
of speech, all that jazz, then please do get back in touch. And guys, they never, usually, ever get back in touch. But on this one occasion, they did. And so the May after, I get a message from this PR saying, "Oh, by the way, are you free on Monday?" Now, in truth, I wasn't free on Monday.
How many days before Monday was this?
This was 3 days before Monday.
So this was a Friday.
Yeah, well, I suppose I was thinking 3 working days, so I was going Thursday, but it was a Thursday or a Friday. Let's call it Thursday evening. Let's split the difference.
Or the week before.
The week before.
That's nice.
Thank you very much.
you.
Saved us both. Good. And I was on that Monday. It was like half term or something. I had my son. I wasn't available. I think I was, you know, going somewhere. But wisely, gentlemen, I cancelled my plans. I went to Buckingham Palace on the Monday, And because I never thought he was going to say yes. And this is before everything went really badly for him. You know,
Was there a story there to begin with?
Is this around the story?
So you knew there was something.
We knew he'd been friends with this guy, Jeffrey Epstein,
Right.
who, as we now know, was a prolific sex trafficker and sex offender.
Yeah.
We knew they'd been friendly. There's this famous picture, which you might have seen, of the
Yeah.
two of them in Central Park, taken by a pap called Jay Donnelly. You know, the most incredible picture. So we knew they had an association. We knew there were some allegations about Prince Andrew's behaviour, but not to the extent that we do now.
Right.
And we also knew that nobody had really been talking about it for years.
Right.
So in a sense, it would have been, if we'd done an interview with him in May, that bit at the end, which gets a bit sort of like narky, you know, hey, lovely to meet you, tell me about yourself, middle bit where you do a prod, and then like the cursed question at the end that the producer makes you ask, where everything is left in a bad way. We would have asked about Epstein as that last question. And so in the May, I'm invited back, and I didn't even tell my boss, because most of my job was rejection, right? You don't get interviews. We'd never had an interview with any member of the royal family on Newsnight. They will definitely never have one again, that is clear. And I just basically, I've got to be honest with you, sorry to be glib, I treated it a bit like a day out. You know, I hadn't been to Buckingham Palace.
Get to go to the palace.
Get to go to the palace. Obviously did my research, just to be clear. Found out who I was going to meet. I was meeting his chief of staff, a woman called Amanda Thirsk. Very impressive woman. She's the one that's played by Keely Hawes. And she was ex-City, financial background, Oxford or Cambridge, I can't remember which. Super impressive. 7 years she'd worked with him. And she was the one I was going to negotiate with. So I did my prep. I took quite a few pictures, I'm not going to lie, keeping it classy.
Toilets?
Didn't know. I was too nervous to go to the toilets. I'm always a bit worried about going to the bathroom and getting locked in there.
Hang on, you two have got this in common then. Haven't you been to the palace?
A Kensington Palace.
What's that?
Different palace.
So we don't have anything in common. Great. Move on.
This was Buckingham Palace. I'm not flexing.
It's a better palace.
Sorry, darling.
I'm not flexing, but on the palace kind of like hierarchy, I would say it probably is the.
Although ours was with
there.
the future king, so Prince Andrew will never be king. So I don't know if we're playing top trump.
He'll never be king?
I don't think so.
No,
What-
definitely not.
Okay. William pops it. Harry pops it.
Then it'd be George.
They pop it.
Louis
Fucking
pops
hell,
it.
what is happening
He
here?
pops it.
Is Andrew killing them just out of interest?
Regicide.
I don't know any of them details. So then he'll get it. So when you say never, you never say never. Anyway, moving back, please.
It's a distant possibility.
In the palace, you've taken loads of photos, classy.
I'm keeping it classy,
Keeping
taking
it
loads
classy,
of photos.
yeah.
Yeah, you want to see them though, don't I?
Yeah, I do really do, yeah.
Exactly, I know you do. And then go upstairs, meet Amanda. The meeting goes really well, actually. Thank goodness I prepped. I didn't lead with humour, just to be clear. I led with intellect, which seemed to go down better than my boisterous style. And we got to the end of this 3 hours together, and she says, you know, well, it looks like we're going to do an interview. He's going to talk about Brexit, remember that? Meghan and Harry, remember them? He's going to talk about all this stuff that royal family members never speak about. But then she goes, there is a red line. And I start off at 10. The red line was, of course, that he did not want to talk about his association with Jeffrey Epstein.
So you've set up this interview.
Correct.
They've come back to you. It's never happened before. And you basically put that sort of bait out on the hope that you could get a story around the Epstein issues. And then he's come back and agreed to an interview, but doesn't want to talk about his relationship with Epstein.
That's right.
And yet the entire interview is about his relationship with Epstein.
Because things changed a lot after that day, right? So this is May. So I go back to the office, you know, I hope she'll change her mind because we don't do conditions at Newsnight. You know, we don't capitulate on that front. So I knew my editor and my deputy editor would say we can't do this interview, but maybe she's going to change her mind. She doesn't. So now we've said no twice. But it's in May, right? And in May, he had this dodgy friendship with this dodgy guy, but the dodgy guy is still at large.
Right.
After May, Epstein's arrested, indicted, charged, prosecuted, incarcerated, dead. Ghislaine Maxwell, she was at large, right? The socialite who was kind of like the person who helped him to procure young women, who's now been convicted too. She was at large for years. She's arrested. And the FBI are getting interested in Prince Andrew again. And Virginia Giuffre, who is the person who's made the allegations against Prince Andrew, she's bringing a case. She's in the press constantly and relentlessly. So it's gone from, if you like, a forgotten story to the most important story in the world, effectively, for a news journalist, and I know the person who's making decisions about whether he's going to do an interview. So things really gather pace between May and November when the interview actually takes place.
Right, I'm fascinated by this because in nowhere near the same level of importance, but I've been in that situation where you have to send a follow-up email to someone who you'd like to do an interview with. And you word that email incredibly carefully. So when contact needed to be re-established, Sam, how did you phrase that first email?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's part, I think, of the job that is the hardest, because there's a thin line between professionalism and harassment. So you're trying not to alienate them, but you've got to kind of keep them on the hook.
Can't be obsequious.
Exactly. So I suppose my email would have been, when I was keeping it going, would be along the lines of, since we met, this has changed. He's in an invidious position. He needs to speak. The country needs to hear what he's saying. Come on, Newsnight. And then variations of that over the next 6 months, basically, where each time another disaster happens in this tale. Epstein's dead, Maxwell's arrested, Virginia Giuffre's bringing her, important case. Whatever's happening, each time there's a change in the story, I go back with a variety on that theme, or I WhatsApp, or I leave a voicemail. It's this creep of just hoping against hope that at some stage there'll be so much of what I might call, a shit sandwich, to swear for the first time there. Very liberating.
That's what you've gone with.
That's what I've gone with. It's a moment,
Tame?
though. It's a moment.
It's tame, but I quite like a shit sandwich.
Thank
As
you
in,
very
no,
much.
it's a good use of it. I like it. Thank you.
I feel that's the position that he was in, because there had been a Dispatches, the Channel 4 programme, looking into this really important and devastating case and the accusations against him. And there was a panorama coming up. And in that middle portion, I was still in touch with the palace saying, we still have not heard from him. You send out this 30-word piece of paper. There's reams of coverage about this case, and all you do is send out the same 30 words on a piece of paper. He has to speak. And of course, there's a point at which you just don't think that's ever going to happen. And this was unusually a situation in which we got asked back.
What was the email like when you got the thumbs up?
Well, we didn't get the thumbs up. We got a call back in October. I took Emily with me, Emily Maitlis.
Mm-hmm.
We went and did another negotiation in October. 12 days later, we got invited.
What are you negotiating in that chat about? What you want to talk about?
Yeah, it's exactly what you said, right? We're basically putting it all on the table. We're saying to them, this is obviously going to be 100% an interview about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah.
It's 100% an interview about the allegations that have been made against him, which are hugely serious, which, to be clear, he still denies. It's not going to be anything other than that. There's no misunderstanding. But if you're going to do it, what you have in Newsnight and in Emily is you have a fair, methodical, open process where you're going to be treated fairly, and it's up to you whether you've got any good answers. So it's a conversation around that, effectively.
Were you telling the whole truth there?
100%.
In terms of you're going to be treated with a fair crack at it. We've got the right team for you to think, but was there always a little bias to the fact that we think your behaviour's been, how does he describe it? Untoward.
Unbecoming.
Unbecoming.
What a word.
Unbecoming.
Well, look, I think that's an interesting question, because basically there's the two sides of me, right? So obviously, as a journalist, when you're doing an interview like this, you know what you're there for. You're there for the news lines. That's the job, inevitably. But as somebody who used to be in cells with people accused of terrible crimes, part of the professionalism of that, in a sense, because they are your client, is to leave your kind of cynicism, your judgment at the door. So I think he had an unusual position with me, in a sense, and that when I was speaking to him, I wasn't drawing my own conclusions about his guilt. What we were doing, that's not our job. Our job is to provide him with the opportunity to give an explanation of himself, for better or worse. Now, obviously, spoiler, it didn't go well. But if he'd had credible answers to Emily's very fair, methodical questions, it could have gone differently. The truth is, the responsibility lies at his door for those abysmal answers. And we gave him a fair opportunity to give good answers, which he declined to take.
Joe, I'm going to call a little time out there for some adverts. And when we come back, let's do a deep dive into this interview. Joe, I've got to be honest, you are looking magnificent today.
What about you? You're looking lovely too. I wonder if it's anything to do with our new wardrobe from Hera.
I think you might be right, Joe. Like, when you told me I needed a new wardrobe, I was slightly sceptical because it's really hard to find something that works for you, but also works for me.
That's the thing though, mate. Hera offer good quality, attainable clothing. And whilst they do specialise in denim and comfortable sweats, they've got a wide range and versatile collection for both men and women.
Well, that's good news.
Mate, honestly, their stuff is great. It fits lovely, it looks great, and it's super comfy.
Where can people find Hera, Joe?
You can go and treat yourself to a brand new look at heraclothing.com. That is HERA clothing.com. Hey, you want a jumper as nice as mine? Go to heraclothing.com. Come on. Wow. I'm dancing like this because I feel so good. And I feel so good because I've got my Hera clothes on. If you want to feel as good as I do, look as good as I do in this Hera hoodie that I've got, go to heraclothing.com. Hera. 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 That's HERA clothing.com.
Okay, Sam, so we come to the day of the interview. Talk us through it. What time of day are you going to the palace? Is it just you and Emily? You've got a camera person there. What's the setup in the room? Take us inside that day.
So the room that day is completely bizarre because you've got a real disconnect in that room between people who know what they're there for. Emily, obviously, Prince Andrew, myself, Stuart McLean, who was the deputy editor, a guy called Jake Morris, who'd done loads of prep on this interview, brilliant guy, and one cameraman called Keith.
That was all you allowed, one camera?
No, but these were the people who knew what we were there for.
Oh.
So the rest of the people who are in that room have this extraordinary experience where they've been asked to come and do this because we had to keep it on the down low for a couple of reasons. Reason one, they had to trust our discretion, the palace. And reason two, the BBC is a bit of a snake pit. So basically, if other people in the BBC had found out that we had this interview, it was entirely feasible that either they tried to spike our work or phone calls were made to the palace to warn them, you shouldn't do this. You just
Might
never
try
know.
and gazump you as well. Make a
Gazump,
case why they should be doing
exactly.
the interview.
Hang on a minute.
It's mad
The
to say that.
BBC?
Yeah, it's a big I mean, it's not a specifically BBC thing, but it's a large news organisation where a story of that magnitude, a lot of people want their names on it.
People would be trying to gazump you.
Correct.
Oh.
So we had to keep it really on the down low. So a large number of the people that turned up that day didn't know what they were there for. So, the makeup artist, she didn't know what she was there for. I think she assumed Meghan Markle. The photographer who took those iconic pictures that you will have seen of them opposite one another and striding down the hallway. A brilliant bloke called Mark Harrison. He, I think, the day before had the choice between an Argos delivery, other brands are available, of a dishwasher, or going to Buckingham Palace. He had no clue what he was going there for, and luckily for him, he chose Buckingham Palace. So the vast majority of people affiliated with Newsnight in that room didn't know why they were there until they arrived. And the detritus of television is huge, right? So we had 2 cameras, a zoomy camera thing. I worked in telly, I have no idea what it was called, the zoomy camera thing. Not much good, am I? A sound person, we had the makeup, the photographer, you've got Stuart, another producer, Jake, who I mentioned, myself sitting there at the back, and then the various entourages to do with the palace, some of whom I knew, some of whom I didn't.
And there's a lot of entourage with any member of the royal family, isn't there?
Well, here's the critical thing, I think, about the Andrew entourage. He was, in a sense, the forgotten man of the palace. So his entourage was tiny. He had Amanda, and as I said, super competent with her advice. Obviously, she worked closely with him. And it just seemed to largely be the two of them. And I think that's one of the reasons this interview happened, is that they'd kind of been forgotten about. And they certainly brought themselves back into public consciousness.
Would
with this
they
interview.
have had to got clearance from the royal family to do this in the first place?
Well, we don't know, you see, that's the
Right.
process. Because I'm sorry to be like, but I only sort of know what I saw and experienced directly. So we can infer certain things from what's happened before. But I've spoken to people that worked inside the royal household since, many years ago or recently. And they say it's completely conceivable that he said he was doing an interview, but he didn't really go into the details of what the interview was, and people were busy. They didn't really look into it. It's conceivable that nobody really knew the truth about the extent that we were going to be talking about Jeffrey Epstein with him, but I'll never know.
Or do you think they've gone, yeah, right, fuck this, let's hang him out to dry. We know it's going to go
Gone
tits up.
conspiracy already.
Yeah, we know it's going to go fucking tits up. Let him go, and then we can sort of wash our hands of him that way. No.
The only thing about that conspiracy, I'll be interested what you think, Sam, is that the royal family famously don't want to comment on anything. They don't want to admit that things are real, even if they are. It clams up, doesn't it, in times of crisis?
Yeah, I just think that in truth, he was a forgotten man in a forgotten role with not a big staff. He didn't really kind of think through fully clearly the consequences and the possibility of damage that this would do. And I think if anybody had had a look at this who had more experience in the royal household in terms of doing media interviews, they probably would have realised it wasn't the best idea in the world.
These questions, I'm fascinated by this because, again, nothing anywhere near as serious. Mine was entertainment. I worked in sports, Sam. But if you were doing a big interview, you'd finesse your questions, the order of your questions, the exact wording of your questions, alternative wording for your questions, and your brain is constantly shifting the individual questions around in your head so you get the best possible answer. So with a topic like this, which is unbelievably more important and has so much more gravitas than anything I did in sport, how much time did you and Emily spend on those questions?
Well, the person who did that was Esme. So Esme Wren was the editor, and she was one of those great editors that, she would never pass the buck. She was the only sane person left on the team. She didn't come to the palace. Imagine that. You're the editor of Newsnight. She didn't come to the negotiations. She didn't even show up on the day to, experience it. She stayed at the office. She was the only sane one because we were all completely delirious. And she and Emily spent 48 hours prepping and gaming. Now, I would do that in my role as a producer if it was a head of state, with Evan or with Jeremy or with Emily. You'd game it. You'd go through the possibilities of what they would say, where to go next. But
Would you ever role play it as well?
Yeah, well, yeah, but not in outfits, just to be clear, before it goes the wrong way. Before this goes cosplay, I'm not willing to go cosplay at this stage. We're just going to leave that there. But
Okay.
But Esme, she was the one who fulfilled that role with Emily. And imagine the pressure on them. I mean, both their necks are on the line. Emily's professionalism, her entire career is on the line. And Esme's career is also on the line. Residually mine and other members of the team too. But the two of them spent 48 hours together coming up with those brilliant, methodical, non-sensationalist, thorough, brilliantly researched questions. And that's, of course, what did it. He was left to his answers, and his answers were what was so sensational. The questions were simple, methodical, professional, and brilliantly prepared, but nothing to do with me, to be clear.
What was the point where you realised where this interview was going and what he was doing to himself?
Sitting there in that moment, it was a really extraordinary moment because what we had had on the Monday, this is the Thursday, was a face-to-face negotiation with Prince Andrew and a surprise guest, his daughter, Princess Beatrice. And I can tell you, nothing prepares you to go to Buckingham Palace and negotiate with the prince, but then talking about the issues we were talking about in front of his daughter was really quite the curveball. But in that meeting on the Monday, in front of 3 journalists, he had said a lot of the things that you heard in that interview to our faces, but never for 1 second did I think that the 48 hours later when we were there in the palace, he would say them on camera. So when the camera starts rolling, he gives his first answer, which was his best answer. I've no idea what it was, but it didn't say anything that was going to get him in trouble. And then from answer 2, my brain's going, oh my Lord, he's actually going to say the stuff that he said to us.
From that early on?
From that early
So
on.
that was like the, not gotcha moment, but that
Answer
was the
2.
moment where you went, did you have that, not light bulb, like, fucking hell, this is going to go big?
Correct. Answer 2, I thought this is going to go big. And every answer, it just builds up on the increment, right? Because you think you've heard the line, imagining like, the imaginary kind of like headline on a newspaper, which is what, as a news journalist, you're trained to do. You're thinking, it was a good idea to have the friendship. It was a straightforward shooting weekend.
Oh, that one got me. When Emily goes, so on such and such date, you had a party, you attended a party? No, not a party. As if to say, deny any sort of thing going on. And he went, no, it was a ordinary shooting weekend. And you go, is he all right? What the fuck's is he hearing any of this? That got me, that one.
Well, because every answer is a misunderstanding about the question in a sense, right? Because the purpose of the interview, if you're him, is to just keep apologising profusely, profoundly, proficiently, over and over and over, and that never happens. So when I'm sitting there and I hear the shooting weekend, I hear him effectively defending the friendship with Epstein, and then obviously the immortal words that launched a million memes, Pizza Express woking.
Oh my God.
And I didn't sweat at the time. So I was sweating, to be clear. As the interview goes on and on, each time I think, okay, I've heard the headline, he delivers a new one. And that never happens in an interview, particularly with, someone of his kind of like standing, of his fame, someone in the royal family. They don't talk about any of this stuff. And there he is discussing, his behaviours on camera in Buckingham Palace to Newsnight and Emily Maitlis. I mean, it was quite hard to get my head around in the moment, and it still feels quite surreal talking about it, even all these years later.
Let's go into those two most famous lines, Joe. So again, you're watching this. The not sweating line, first of all.
Well, what a crock of shit. What a crock of shit. How's that? Oh, I don't mean to laugh at it, but I have to laugh because it is that far-fetched, and it just comes out of his mouth as easily as that. Well, no. Well, that couldn't possibly be. Well, for starters, I don't sweat. Ever since I was like, what was it? A party? Was that?
Yeah,
and
the
then he came out
accusation
and
was
said,
that he was sweating, and he said that he had PTSD from his military service, so he
which
didn't
I
sweat
don't
at the
know
time.
the ins and outs of whether there is a condition that can be caused by PTSD that then stops you from sweating.
There were like a million articles the day after. I was like, some poor person who was the sweat expert in the world got like a million calls from a million producers, and there were all these articles about whether or not that was a real medical condition.
Now,
the jury seemed to be out on it.
I don't want to don't take this as a defence in the slightest, but devil's advocate might say it sounds that ridiculous. That is it that ridiculous because it's actually true?
The thing about it is, though,
like that's what I'm saying. It's laughable because it's coming out of his mouth, and you go.
The same could be said about Pizza Express in Woking, because it's such a ridiculous detail that if you were going to try and come up with something, then you would dispense with Pizza Express in Woking as too impossible.
But then is he thingied it with the pizza? Has he given that much detail on it to try and reverse psychology it to go exactly the discussion we're having now?
And the fact, Sam, that all these years later, Joe and I are this exercised by it and this obsessed with particular lines. For you as a producer in that moment, there has got to be a bit where you're going, fucking hell, this is actually happening.
Yeah, I mean, you are pinching yourself, I can't lie. Sitting in there, hearing all of that go onto camera, onto tape, and thinking about what the consequences would be. The two parts of myself, the ex-lawyer is going, holy hell, mate. You've basically given a jackpot to a prosecutor here. They have won the lottery with this interview. And the journalist side of myself is going, holy hell. This is, at the beginning, I was thinking the scoop of the year. By the middle of it, I'm thinking scoop of the decade. And in terms of the BBC and our output, I thought it was the scoop of the century for us, really, by the end of the interview. If it made it to air. I mean, you can't believe that this is actually going to get it to air. This is Thursday. It's going out on Saturday. How is this going to be on air? You can't really believe it. But it was quite an extraordinary experience. I mean...
What would have stopped it going to air?
Well, I think there's just kind of like this paranoia when you're a television producer, particularly with such a contentious piece of journalism, that you're just worried something's going to happen. It could be like a technicality.
Yeah, it's not gone to tape.
We've lost the sound.
We've lost the sound. We've lost the sound. The tape gets lost, something goes wrong with the machine. It chews it up, a data problem. Or on a more sort of like sinister end, it could be what, we might call the establishment. You kind of worry something might happen where somebody tells someone something and lawyers get involved. And before you know it, you've got this piece of work that you think is incredible. And is it going to make it to air 2 days later? And I mean, I think that's, it's a rational consideration to think that maybe someone might try to stop it. But no one did, to my knowledge.
How was the end when the camera stopped rolling? And you have that slightly awkward dance where you have to say thank you as the producer and the presenter to this person who's just absolutely skewered themselves. Do you think he or Amanda had sufficient inkling at that stage of the magnitude of what he'd said?
If you picture the scene, the interview's come to an end, my head is down, I'm trying not to lose it. I'm next to one of his members of staff who's been super nice to me. I do not know what to say to her. Now, I'm really beset by a huge problem, which is I am really honest and blunt, which you may have noticed. I can't say something.
No, I have noticed that.
I think
yes.
you might have noticed. Yeah. I can't, right? So I have to say something to her. My voice goes squeaky when things get nervous. So I said to her very carefully the following sentence. So, how do you think it went? And she says, marvellous. Wasn't he wonderful? And as I lifted my eyes, gents, right, and obviously I'm not want to make eye contact with anyone. We don't want to do any eye rolls. We have to be really careful how we respond. As I lift my eyes and I can see the vista, I can see Prince Andrew and Emily. You would imagine that Emily Maitlis would look pleased as punch, secretly, keeping it professional, and he would look ashen. No. He looked like he'd won the lottery and she looked ashen because we knew what we had and what he had done. And he clearly had no clue. He invited her on a tour. He invited me too, but I declined because I couldn't face it. And those pictures, you have to zoom on them now, that Mark Harrison, the photographer, took. Those pictures of the two of them together across the table and striding down the hall, they were taken after this interview took place. And look at his face. He looks pleased as punch. So he did not understand, particularly at that moment, how badly the interview had gone. And I don't know how long it took for him to realise that it had not gone well.
So this took place on the Thursday.
Correct.
To go out on the Saturday night?
That's right. We tweeted about it on the Friday, and that's when the world went on fire.
What was the tease on the tweet?
I think they just did a world exclusive. Prince Andrew sits down with Emily Maitlis to talk about his friendship with Jeffrey Epstein.
That's it. So no...
Just a picture.
Yeah.
No clip. And then I think on the Friday night, Emily did a two-way, where the presenter asked questions of someone in the studio. It was Kirsty Walk presenting that night. And she asked Emily about the interview. And we showed, I think, one clip, a small one that wasn't super contentious, mid-contentious. And, people were like, whoa. And then, of course, when they saw the 45 minutes of content and how basically 44 of it was pretty damaging to him, the world set alight with it. And it was very clear from the response that it had not gone well.
I can't get my head around it. I've watched it again this morning and I still can't get my head around how the words come out of his mouth and he thinks this is a good idea. This is a great enough answer. Like when he says he goes over to end the friendship after he's been convicted. After everything's, and he goes over to end the friendship. And the way Emily Maitlis keeps probing, the way she keeps going with it, but calmly, and just asks the next question, doesn't antagonise the last answer, just asks the next question. And then when she gets to the point where she goes, so why did you stay at his house? Oh, well, it was the most convenient thing to do. You're the prince of a royal family. I'm pretty sure you could have got any fucking room in any hotel in any part of the world just by clicking your fingers. And your excuse for staying with a convicted sex offender was, it was most convenient for me.
He said it was a convenient place to stay, right? And he also said that he felt that as a man, I think he said basically as a man of honour, it was correct that he went and ended the friendship.
Yeah, I
mean, I've ended relationships by text. Sorry, mate. I mean, I really feel that I could end my friendship with a convicted sex offender other than in person, but that's just me.
He said over the phone was a chicken's way out.
Why not just not ever get in contact with him again? He's a convicted sex offender. Why do you need to formally end that friendship? I mean, the fact he's convicted of a sex offence would probably end most friendships with people.
But I tell you what was so weird as well, gents. You can imagine, fast forwarding to last year, where we're now sort of 3 or 4 years after this, and I'm now sitting on set in a place similar to where you guys record. I'm on set with Rufus Sewell, who's our Prince Andrew, in, hours and hours of prosthetics. I've never actually met him without the prosthetics. I understand he's quite a handsome man, so I'm told. And Gillian Anderson dressed, because the costume, the staging, the lighting, the camera angles, everything that Netflix put together, and Philip Martin, who is the director in this, the way they put it together, it was, for me, like being literally there all over again, because they're the same distance apart, the lighting is the same, the angles are the same. They created that room, the South Drawing Room, from scratch. I don't know whether we were in Milton Keynes, but it certainly wasn't Buckingham Palace. And to sit there again and hear Gillian and Rufus say those lines made it even more kind of strange, because when you hear someone else saying it, you can't really believe that they're saying it. It's just beyond belief. The answers are just beyond belief.
It's got to be up there with one of the biggest scoops in British media, not just British royal media. It has to be up there with one of the biggest in British media. Were you ready for that to then just explode worldwide?
Yeah, I think I realised how big it would be, like in theory, but the practice of it was quite weird, right? Because ultimately I go back to my place, where my teen, who, God bless him, is indifferent, to what's going on. Thank goodness, it was wonderful. His indifference was great. I'm back on my sofa, with my Pringles, my snack of choice. And then, from Saturday through to Wednesday, you can imagine what my phone was like. I had to turn it off. I sat in a dark room on the Sunday. Everything was burning up. I'm being approached by journalists, my 15 seconds in the public eye, which is not something that I've courted or been interested in. I've just ended up in a Netflix movie, but what can you do? I'll struggle on, lads. But you know what I mean? That was not my job. My job was just, nobody knew who I was. I didn't exist. And it was only because Esme, my editor, had given me credit in a tweet that people knew about me. Hugely grateful to her for doing that. But it meant that I had some attention on me. And then by the Wednesday, just 4 days later, I'm sitting on that sofa again, stuffing my face, no doubt. And on the news comes up that Prince Andrew has stepped back from public life. So just a few days later, bearing in mind the Monday before I'm face-to-face with him and Princess Beatrice, they say yes on the Tuesday, they do it on the Thursday, it goes out on the Saturday, and on the Wednesday of the week after, effectively his royal career, or whatever you want to call it, is over, sacked by his own mum. And that moment I found quite overwhelming, I'm not going to lie, because it was like the enormity of what we had done and, what had happened was writ large in that, and obviously days and days. And still now, if you open up a tabloid today, you could find a story about this interview. It's mentioned almost every day. So it has echoed through the years in terms of its effect in a number of ways. And I could never have predicted that.
There is an absolute skill for a presenter in that position where they know it has the potential to be a career-altering interview, and as the interview is going on, they're now certain of that fact, to just leave their ego there, because the genius of what Emily does in that interview is it's never, ever about her. She is just very gently there, just nudging and probing and nudging and probing. And that is, in a pressurised situation like that, is such a skill, Sam, isn't it?
I totally agree. I think that's the sophistication and the brilliance of what she did, right? Is that she took herself out of the equation. I cannot imagine how nervous she was, the prep she put in. Obviously, this doesn't happen overnight. 20 years of experience that she's had, one of the foremost broadcasters in the country, if not the world. But, in that moment, to not lose it, and all the way through, the only time you see a flash of anything is that moment where she uses the word unbecoming.
Yes, she did so well to hold it. You could see it turning in
Correct.
it, like it felt like she wanted to say, "Are you fucking serious? Unbecoming, you fucking piece of shit." That's what I pictured her coming to, then rein it back and go, "Unbecoming." You think, unbecoming.
And that's the only time, right? That's the only time you see anything other than the pure professionalism that Emily always shows, which of course you see in Gillian's characterisation as well. That cool, calm on the surface, incredible professionalism, incredible ability to hold back, to not show anything on your face, to not react, all of that, sensational, and the perfect storm for that interview in those circumstances with that individual. Full credit to Emily, what a tour de force.
Sam, we know that dramatised versions of real cases can have quite a big effect on changing people's perceptions of it, and we've seen that with the post office scandal. Now, it's slightly different with the interview because the interview made such a splash at the time, but the world moves on pretty quickly. Do you think, with everything that's happened subsequently to Prince Andrew and the way that I struggle to say wrapped it up, but the way that it was concluded, do you think the dramatisation is maybe a good little nudge on the public and to remind them what actually happened?
Well, I think it's a double thing, because I think basically it's not gone out of the public consciousness. And as you guys have said, this was a moment in which journalism, to be pretentious for a moment, held someone to account. So we don't. Obviously, he denies any guilt, but in the court of public opinion, this was a moment. And
he does deny guilt.
He
but
does.
I can't get my head round. Let's deal with the facts of it. Did he pay off one of the victims?
He settled,
alleged victims.
Yeah.
£12 million?
They say it's around 12 million. I mean, in truth, he settled a civil suit with no liability. To deconstruct that sentence, he gave some money, but he didn't say that he did anything. So obviously lots of people find that hard to connect the two.
So that's where we're at in terms of the facts.
Exactly.
That is where it stands. He's done this interview, he stepped back from thingy, went on for years, and then...
And he paid this money.
Off.
But I think what's interesting about this film, and one of the reasons I was so keen to do it, is obviously that interview, seismic and extraordinary, is 5% of this tale. But the other 95% is all the things that we've been talking about today. My role, my mum, not my real mum, my mum, Amanda Redman, is in it, my kid is in it, Lucas, some of the backstory, what it's like in a newsroom, which obviously can get quite fiery and feisty. The process of the negotiation, obviously some of it's dramatised to make it more interesting than Sam sends 350 emails, Sam sends 351 emails, Sam WhatsApps. But it really is, in a sense, an homage to journalism and also to the women who were involved in this tale, whether it's Emily, Esme, or Amanda, of course, a different outcome for her, and to my good self, someone that nobody knew existed, whose tale is now a Netflix movie. And I suppose, in a sense, that's what I hope people will enjoy, because the point of view is someone in an ordinary-ish job who finds themselves in an incredible situation. And to see Billie living through what I lived through on screen, arriving by bus, to be clear. They put me in a taxi and I made it very clear I would not have been in a taxi, I would have been on a bus.
To get a bus to Shepherd's Bush Green and walk up, or straight down Woodlane?
I got a bus from wherever it is that I am, all the way along to Green Park.
Oh, for the interview. Nice.
Yeah, for the interview. Arrived by bus. So all of that, to see that other 95% put together in a, an entertaining, of course, but a compelling tale is really just, as I said, I pinch myself. I'm the luckiest woman alive.
I would like to say thank you, Sam. It has been fascinating to hear all about the news production world and obviously the story behind that famous interview with He Shall Not Be Named.
You can name him.
What do you mean?
You don't empower him by calling him Prince Andrew.
Well, you do.
Although, did you have to... This is a ridiculous point to answer this question. How did you feel about when you were doing the initial chats? Are you calling him Your Highness, or did you call him Andrew?
Yeah, we were told that there was a certain way of doing things, because that was one of my first questions, the etiquette of it. I'm not good at deference, you won't be surprised to hear. Curtsying isn't really my vibe. I wasn't...
Hello.
Not really my thing. But the official way, because I did specifically ask that question to make sure I didn't, cause more offence than usual, was that the first time you say Your Royal Highness, and then the second time, and thereafter you say Sir.
Oh.
So
That's a rugby referee.
Yeah, I think if I'd had a quid for every time I said sir, I'd probably have quite a lot of money, because there's a certain awkwardness in it, right? Because you can't say Andrew or, mate. So you kind of get stuck in the sir. So I think I probably said sir a bit too much, but there is a certain need to say certain words, which, it's a bit difficult, but you do what you're told sometimes.
Sam, thank you so much for coming on.
Pleasure.
What's your film called?
It's called Scoop. It's on Netflix on April the 5th.
I can't wait for that. I cannot wait for it. It's got two of my favourite actresses in it, and I cannot wait. Can you wait, Tom?
No.
Well, you'll have to. It's out on the 5th of April.
Wait, I shall.